quickly note that perfect timing because I was just about to say this meeting will be recorded, partly just to keep a record and to ensure that those who aren't able to join have an opportunity to listen in later on. Let me also just say that at the end of this evening's presentation, we'll be holding a Q&A. At that time, if you'd like to speak, please use the raise hand function in Zoom, and do not unmute yourself until we call on you, just as a matter of courtesy. We'll also be monitoring the Q&A and the chat, and we encourage everyone to use the Q&A function. We'll be generally alternating between the Q&A and then the raise hand function for everyone. And then also we encourage everyone to tell us about yourself, to put your name, pronouns, or relationship to AAMUP in the chat, which we'll also be using to monitor for comments and feedback. Great. So just to kick things off with an agenda, we'll be starting with some opening remarks from Council members Crystal Hudson and Chiose, their team, which will be followed by Edith Su Chen, our executive director. While the draft zoning is really the heart of today's meeting, we'll also be discussing next steps and providing some background. Many of you are really familiar with AAMUP, but we also want to ensure that we're sharing as much info about recent outreach and just general background about why we're planning for the area. And then, as I mentioned towards the end, we'll be going over next steps and other components of the plan, which we feel are really important, not only to share, but also use this meeting as a chance to have a discussion and hear what you want us as the city to focus on. So with that, I would like to now hand it over to the council members' teams.
Hi there. Good evening, everyone. This is Councilmember Crystal Hudson. I'm really pleased to see so many folks joining us this evening, and thank you to those who have participated in all of the public sessions to date. We've done a lot of work and a lot of listening. Thanks also to DCP for their partnership in getting us to this point. I do want to just make note that what's going to be presented this evening is City Planning's draft zoning proposal, which is just that, it's a draft. It will most likely be further modified as we move through the process. And there are going to be multiple opportunities for revisions and modifications after the scoping hearing in response to public testimony, with an updated proposal that's prepared for certification. And I'm sure that's going to be presented in a little bit more detail throughout this presentation. But, I know there's there are a lot of emotions and feelings and a lot of time and effort and energy that a lot of different folks have invested into this process. And so I just want to make sure that everybody is clear that this is a draft. This is like the first sort of big step moving out of the public engagement process. So I don't want folks to think that this presentation is by any means the final presentation. That being said, I want to thank all of the city agencies, the community boards, the steering committee members, Council Member Chiose, the Borough President Antonio Reynoso, and so many others who've been part of this process, also my staff, and in particular, my Chief of Staff, Casey Addison, and my Director of Policy and Budget Initiatives, Andrew Wright, for all they've done to sort of help get us through to this phase. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Councilmember Osei.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Hudson, and good evening, everyone. I'm New York City Councilmember Chiose, representing the 36th District, which includes Bed-Stuy and Crown Heights. I again want to thank my colleague, Councilmember Hudson, for a lot of the labor and work that she's put into this process for this rezoning. I don't think there's ever been as transparent as and engaging as a process such as this one, in partnership with city agencies, as well as other partners. And I want to thank my constituents who are on this call and have been engaging in this process for some time now. I think having your voice within this process does not only help within the guidance of where this project goes, but within future development and changes that we see across both of our districts in the future. So thank you again for showing up to this call. Looking forward to seeing you a part of this process and the coming months ahead of however much left we have of this. And I hope that you learn a lot from this presentation. Thank you.
Great. If do you want to jump in?
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this evening. I'm Ida Suchen, Executive Director at the Department of City Planning. On behalf of everyone here at DCP, I want to first thank Councilmember Hudson for your leadership throughout the planning process, and Councilmember Osei for your continued partnership and incredible support. I also want to recognize the decade of planning work by Community Board 8 and all those who participated more recently in the outreach meetings this past winter and spring, led by WXY, including our partners at HPD, DOT, and the Parks Department. And last but not least, I'd like to call out the hard work of the team members in Councilmember Hudson's office at WXY, and of course at DCP, all who have helped us gather public input and move this process forward. We were thrilled with the release of the AAMUP Community Vision and Priorities Report last month, which summarizes the top priorities heard from hundreds of residents, businesses, and various stakeholders who joined working group meetings and workshops, along with a dedicated group of steering committee members. The report marks an important milestone in this larger process and will serve as a foundation for what priorities DCP and our agency partners will focus on as the plan continues to take shape. This is a critical plan, not just for the local community, but also for the borough and the city, touching on key goals of the Mayor's City of Yes initiatives around growing jobs and housing in transit accessible areas. This is core to our mission as an agency and integral to our success as a city, especially as the housing crisis continues and puts more and more pressure on renters and our aging housing stock. Today, our team is excited to share a first draft of the proposed zoning for AAMUP, informed by the outreach and the overall vision for planned growth. My colleague Jonah will guide us through the details of that draft very shortly. In addition, the draft zoning will serve as a framework for developing the land use application and starting an environmental review analyses as part of a draft environmental impact statement. That takes about 8 months to complete, and it is one of the final steps before the formal ULURP process begins. The draft zoning is one small piece of the larger planning effort, and while this is a necessary step as we enter a more technical phase of the process, our engagement will not stop. We will continue to hold public outreach events focusing on specific capital and programmatic investments with city agency partners to advance many of the community's priorities. And in addition to the draft zoning, we are also so happy to join our agency partners in announcing the early programmatic investments in the neighborhoods around Atlantic Avenue. Together with our partners at HPD, we are thrilled to share that we are bringing 154 units of affordable senior housing to a former parking lot on Dean Street. And in conjunction with the Parks Department, we are making a nearly $24 million investment in the St. Andrews Playground to provide new play areas for kids, revamp facilities, additional seating, and more. So these are just early down payments on many other improvements coming to Central Brooklyn as part of this plan. With that, I'll hand it back to my colleagues at DCP for their presentation. Thank you all again for being here tonight.
Thank you so much, Edith, and to the council members. We'll echo that sentiment, and we're going to be just starting with a little just note on where we are in the process. So let me just start by saying that as the council members noted, we're really building on a larger process that began in M-Crown over 10 years ago. But just to summarize the recent history, we've really started our process in the spring of 2022 when the city formally committed to a outreach and engagement plan and advancing a neighborhood plan. And over the past 6 to 8 months, we've been very busy with engagement, holding working group meetings, community planning workshops, and convening steering committee meetings, with the culmination of that being the release of the community vision and priorities report less than 2 weeks ago. Where we are today is such an important milestone in that we're ready to share a first draft, and I mean first draft in the most genuine form of our draft zoning, which is really important because, as we'll discuss later on, it serves as a basis for further discussions, for land use application, for environmental review. But this is by no means the final zoning, and we're also planning to host a second in-person open house style draft zoning meeting as well, with the location and time TBD. Great. So first, we just want to frame today's discussion by explaining what a neighborhood plan is and the process. We're going to take a moment to transition for a slightly interactive exercise. I think most are familiar with menti.com. It's a website that allows you to enter information, and in real time, we can see the responses. I encourage everyone to go to the website now. You can use your smartphone or computer and enter the code above. And please feel free to write responses of anything you think a neighborhood plan is, whether it's housing, transportation. The floor is yours. All right, I see vision for the future, community involvement, rezoning, money, equity, serves community, useful. We hope it is useful. Collaborative, comprehensive, collective action, equity. These are all great. Open space, economic development. Great. See a concentration of future and comprehensive. Benefits of residents. Excellent. Right, I think that's a good number of responses. We could kind of shift to the next slide. So I think a lot of what we heard about housing, equity, involvement of the community, those are all core to our role here. And we like to think of neighborhood plans on a little bit of like buckets, or first what guides a plan, and that can be, as many people pointed out, it's the past outreach, it's the feedback, it's a combination of the local and citywide goals, and more particularly the priorities that we hear. from the community. And then as far as the topics that are covered, some folks mentioned open space and housing. Those are both important, but obviously rezoning is central to our work. But we're trying to have a well-rounded and, as people said, a comprehensive plan that really encompasses all types of issues and topics that matter to a neighborhood. And in particular, not just the area itself, but things that affect the area too within the surrounding area. So that could be schools or city services as well. And then with respect to the actual tools that can achieve a plan, I think some folks mentioned land use actions, and like that is obviously the foremost piece of it. But an equally, if not a more important part, is improvements to the public realm or capital and programmatic investments that make a plan well-rounded. And then finally, a lot of our work revolves around coordination with the community, with agencies. So that's another key function of our work as well. For today's discussion, we're not going to cover everything. We're really focused on draft zoning, which includes elements of housing and urban design. So we just wanted to clarify that right here. And then just to frame the neighborhood plan process itself. So as I said, we're really building on many years of outreach from the community, which is wonderful because we're not starting from scratch. We've done a lot of work already, particularly with Community Board 8. And we're coming off a pretty robust outreach engagement process where we have a clear sense of what are the top priorities and issues that the community wants to see and is enshrined in the vision plan report. Now, as Edith mentioned, we're entering a more technical phase and putting pen to paper as far as what is the specific zoning that we're considering, and then putting together a more formal land use application. We're also trying to take a lot of the priorities and issues that were heard from the previous part of the process and then translate that to actually scoping out possible projects with city agencies. And then there's a huge interactive component to that as well, which we'll touch on later. And then we're also going to be focused on environmental review, which can be its own process. It takes about 8 months, and that's another reason why we want to get a head start in sharing zoning. We feel that that's important just to kind of move the process along, and also by starting our environmental review work earlier, that can give us a preview, an understanding of kind of a lot of the issues that need to be addressed as well. And then the final stages of the process are the formal public review or ULURP process, where we release the draft environmental impact statement, and then hold, it's about a 7-month period which I know many of you are familiar with, where we hold meetings with the community board, borough president, and just reviewed by the city planning commission and city council. Lastly, I just want to be very clear that our work does not end with the adoption of the plan. We feel very strongly about the need to carry on our work, to continue meeting with city agencies, with stakeholders, with the community, to make true on our promise and complete the commitments that we've made as well. So now we're gonna just touch on background and history. So many of you are very familiar with AAMUP, but for those who are new to the process, we just wanted to give a little background, starting with where are we? What is the area that we're focused on? And that's really primarily an area along Atlantic Avenue, that's within Community Districts 3 and 8. just to the north of Prospect Park. And it's primarily an industrially zoned area, zoned M11, located between the areas of Crown Heights, Bed-Stuy, Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, and Prospect Heights. And the Atlantic Avenue, as we all know, is one of the kind of the longest and widest corridors in Brooklyn. It connects downtown Brooklyn with Queens and Long Island. It's also a 120-foot wide corridor that in many ways serves as a barrier between areas just by given how auto-oriented and wide it is. And the industrial zoning in the area that we're focused on, which is roughly Vanderbilt Avenue on the west to Nostrand Avenue the east, is more auto-oriented and industrial in a sense that there are many vacant lots and self-storage auto shops. But due to the area's industrial zoning, that's really been a major barrier for both new housing, but also any type of growth as well. So just a little history. We'll go through this relatively quick. Many people ask, why is the area zoned M11? Why is the character the way it is today? And that really dates back to when there was a freight rail line that ran at grade in the 1800s along Atlantic Avenue and served as a way for the transport of goods. And so during that time, many industrial businesses and warehouse style businesses flourished along the corridor in neighboring blocks. In the early 1900s, the freight rail line was removed and the Long Island Railroad was actually moved below grade. And then during that time, as we all know, in the early 1900s to the better half of the last century, that's when the automobile use skyrocketed. And so what were many industrial businesses along the corridor, many of those kind of transitioned to gas stations, repair shops, auto repair, or auto garages, which was in many ways continues to the present day. So in 1961, when the city was zoned comprehensively, that is when the zoning for M11 was put in place, and it really enshrined the character of the area and served as a barrier for any type of growth, mainly due to the M11 zoning only allowing up to one FAR with a high parking requirement and not allowing any new residential. M11, I should say, is also a district that's designed for more suburban style, low density areas with high parking requirements. So, of course, very out of date, given the current conditions of the neighborhood. And then due to the M11 zoning, but also due to broader kind of changes happening across the city, the population was actually in decline from 1970. The chart on the right shows the population change by each decade from 1970 to 2020, and as you can see, the population was actually much higher in 1970 than it was in today even. And if you look through historical photos, you can actually see a lot of homes that were once in the AAMUP area, but due to the zoning from 1961, that kind of contributed to the further disinvestment of the area. Many homes were actually demolished over time partly due to the zoning. And then I would say from despite the decline of population from the 1970s, from 1980 to 1990, there was an 11% increase. And that was also a period where a lot of immigrants from the Caribbean were coming to Brooklyn and neighborhoods were being rejuvenated. And then during the 1990s and early 2000s, the populations stabilized. However, during the mid to late 2000s, that's also a period when a lot of contextual rezonings were mapped that largely kind of sought to preserve the current housing capacity and character of the area. And that's also a period where demand for housing really started to grow and putting pressure on the existing housing stock and raising prices. And then we'll go into a little more about the character of AAMUP today. But we just want to quickly note that due to the zoning, there has been very little redevelopment or any type of development within the past decade, with the exception of the adaptive reuse of a few industrial buildings. All right, so we just want to pause for a moment to ask another question. What uses do you see in the area, either based on the history or your own experience? And these could be land uses, businesses, whatever you think comes to mind when you think of AAMUP. See, auto repair, gas stations. Kitchen stuff. A lot of kitchen supply stores. Tire repair. Industrial. There is some housing. That is true. Warehouses. Transit to airport. That's a great point. Storage. Charter bus parking. That's the Muncie tour bus lot. Great. I see hotels, vacant lots. Yeah, it looks like I see auto repair and gas station being the predominant uses. All right, I think we could move to the next slide. So we want to take a moment to really drive home why we're planning for AAMUP, why are we here, and also weave in a little bit of existing conditions as well. So I would say first and foremost, we're really driven by kind of the urgent planning needs for the city, and that's really focused on many different topics, but we want to be very upfront that we're living in a major crisis of affordability and housing shortage. There are many causes and issues with that, which we're not going to fully solve through AAMUP, but we do think that AAMUP is an important part of our efforts as a city. And with that, some of the top issues that we hear constantly are that the cost of housing is too high, that there just simply aren't enough available homes, and limited choice for the homes that are available, particularly within central Brooklyn and areas around AAMUP. And also that the quality of housing is deteriorating, and the cost of maintenance is also increasing, which is added to the issues that I know many of us could probably personally describe as well. When we kind of look at on a local level how this housing crisis translates, one of the best metrics we have is by looking at just the number and percentages of rent-burdened households. And in community districts 3 and 8, which make up the most of the area around AAMUP, the percentage of residents who are rent burdened is higher than both the city average and also the borough average. And rent burden, for those who, I think we all know generally what rent burden is, but I'll just say that it from a technical standpoint, we define that as a household spending more than 30% of their gross income on rent. And so this clearly points to the need for housing, but particularly affordable housing in the area. We also want to just take a moment to recognize that with the changes in rent burdens and rent burden in the area, there have been many demographic changes in and around AAMUP, and so this captures the changes in race and ethnicity by each 10-year census from 1990 to 2020. Within the census tracts overlapping with a quarter mile of the area. And as you can see, while the population has increased slightly, there have also been a major shift and decline in the Black population, while seeing a major increase in the white population, as well as some more modest increases in the Hispanic and Asian populations. We want to be open and transparent about this. I'm also cognizant of my own, background as a white male, and we encourage everyone to speak about this in the chat, and we just want to be clear that we're very much aware of these issues, and in many ways we want to see how we can better encourage affordable housing, especially given the how contextual rezonings, particularly in the mid to late 2000s, have kind of limited capacity and haven't been able to produce a lot of the affordability that we need. I also want to clarify that we've done a lot of work as a city already in this administration. Last year, the mayor released a blueprint for housing called Housing Our Neighbors. And then more recently, the Department of City Planning is working on a citywide zoning text amendment called Housing City of Yes for Housing Opportunity. And as part of AAMUP, we're closely working with that team. There's a lot of synergy between both proposals. But just want to note that in addition to the kind of the local neighborhood-based work, we're also thinking about how to address this issue citywide. So from a general planning lens, we'd like to just remind everyone that AAMUP is one of the most transit accessible parts of Brooklyn, not just accessible to the subway, but also to the LIRR at Nostrand Avenue, which has a regional component, and also accessible to major employment nodes like downtown Brooklyn, Manhattan. And in many ways, we view AAMUP as kind of a network of smaller former or current industrial areas that serve as smaller job hubs in the borough where people can walk to work. So with all that said, we that from a general planning lens, we really think AAMUP is an appropriate place for more housing and job growth. With that said, we also want to call attention to just the contextual zonings that have been mapped over the past few decades, almost entirely surrounding AAMUP, with the exception of the downtown Brooklyn rezoning further to the west, and also Atlantic Guards or Pacific Park directly to the west. And these contextual rezonings have, while they have largely preserved the character, they've added to our crisis in a sense that, where can we find appropriate places to accommodate growth within the area? And then in addition to the contextual rezonings, historic districts have also added to that as well. We, of course, are we love brownstones, and that character is near and dear to all of our hearts. But as we're planning, for the future generations of Brooklyn, we're trying to be mindful of, what are areas of Brooklyn, what like Atlantic Avenue, that can serve to accommodate growth and support housing for current and future generations. And then this is just a land use map to further illustrate this. As you can see, the area around AAMUP is largely either yellow or orange, and those represent residential uses, and you can see very little grays in the surrounding area, which means that the areas around AAMUP are largely built up. These are well-established neighborhoods, as we all know. But then within AAMUP, you can see a lot of grays, blacks, and light pinks, which represent either parking, vacant land, or kind of low job dense auto-oriented uses, which signify to us, as an area that can kind of accommodate growth as well. And then here are a couple of photos just to illustrate that. You can see kind of the mix of character in the types of warehouses, but also a lot of the open storage and parking lot areas. So most importantly, we are really driven by the interest in planning for this area, and the commitment and support we've gotten over the years for moving this process forward, for having the city be willing to take the step and partner on a holistic, comprehensive plan. So we just want to take a moment to draw attention to the resolutions that CB8 has done through M-Crown, and especially their work with the M-Crown subcommittee. And then I would say equally valuable and important to mention too is just the amount of private applications and development interest here. Since 2019, we've had 7 private applications that have been approved within AAMUP, and that doesn't include a few others that are across the street or adjacent. And so another driving force for us is just the need to develop a holistic vision and plan for this area that kind of draws all of these applications together. The other thing we want to note too, and this is a similar vein of there has been quite a bit of housing growth in and around AAMUP. We estimate that there have been about 16,000 people that have been added that have moved to the area or through births from the 2000 to 2020 census. We've also had about 15,700 or so units that have been either built or permitted since 2000. This is up to just a few months ago, this data as well. And so as you can see, there's been a lot of growth. Some of these have actually been related to Pacific Park, which accounts for about 3,200 of these units, as well as a few of the developments that were facilitated by the private applications. So, in addition, among everything else, we also want to be clear that we're very much aware of the growth that's occurring in the area, and in our planning efforts, we want to do the best we can to work with city agencies to ensure that we're planning not just for AAMUP, but also for the necessary services that come with all of this recent growth too. Great. So now we just want to spend a couple minutes on the recent planning history and context, particularly the recent outreach and vision plan. So as I mentioned before, we're really trying to continue the work and that was started by Community Board 8, which really grew from the Crown Heights West rezoning from 2013, and then the formation of the M Crown Land Use Committee. And in 2015, Community Board 8 issued a resolution which called upon, amongst many things, for affordable housing, for a mix of light industrial uses, and really just put forth a vision for redeveloping the area, which has been very instrumental to all of our work. Shortly after, we were starting to engage with Community Board 8. And then in 2018, we released a land use framework, which some of you may be familiar with, but for those who aren't, I'll just briefly summarize that we identified kind of 3 sub areas, which has Atlantic Avenue and red being the premier area where we thought it was appropriate for a higher density commercial district given the width and prominence of the corridor. And then in the orange and yellow areas, those are also different types of mixed use that, but at a more lower scale reflective of the community. And then in the purple areas are where we, because there were a concentration of loft style buildings, we initially believe it was good to find efforts to preserve those and so we mapped, or we distinguished that area as an area for non-residential use only. And then just a quick note, in 2019, 2020, that's when Community Board 8 issued a revised resolution. And then unfortunately, we did pause some of our work during the pandemic, but we did also continue some outreach with Community Board 8 on various topics, including demographic and population change, urban design, and affordable housing. And then this brings us to 2022. And this is really probably the most pivotal period for us, where earlier that year, we received a letter from Crystal Hudson, Chiose, and a number of elected officials and stakeholders directly requesting us, HPD and DOT, to move forward with a plan. And in the early spring of that year, we as the city formally committed to that. We responded to the letter, and that really kickstarted the current phase of this process, where over the following months, we continue to work with the council member and council land use as well to figure out what engagement looks like, and then also onboard a independent facilitator, WXY, to support the outreach process. And then in early of this year, this is when we were really focused on outreach and engagement, that I know many of you participated in, and that's where we're really happy with just how much dedication, how much work we all put into that. That included 9 steering committee meetings, a total of 9 working group meetings that were on 3 different topics, which are listed in the slide. And then also 3 kind of larger community planning workshops, where different folks joined, and we held 2 of those were open house style events. And then just to summarize the community vision and priorities report, first and foremost, we heard loud and clear that there was a need for permanent deep affordability and try to maximize opportunities for affordable housing as much as we can. but recognizing that allowing growth and density is a part of that as well, because allowing more housing can also mean more affordable housing. But then also considering the affordable housing needs in the area, especially the threats for tenant harassment and displacement. Second, there was a clear consensus on supporting a mixed use community and growth more broadly, that included housing and a mix of jobs and services. Third, we heard that a top priority amongst other capital and infrastructure needs is a need for redesigning Atlantic Avenue, making it a safe and pedestrian friendly place for all users, whether they're bicyclists, pedestrians, vehicles, and also trucks as well, which use the area, the corridors that throughout. Fourth, we heard that even though Prospect Park is not too far from AAMUP, there is a lack of open space both in and shortly and close to AAMUP. So there was a clear need for looking at both new open space opportunities, but also opportunities to improve existing spaces. And then fifth, we heard of the need for job training and business support, both for businesses that are directly and indirectly affected by the rezoning, and also a need to just support jobs, particularly for existing residents who lack a college degree. And then finally, we heard of a clear interest in better utilizing the Bedford Atlantic Armory space. That's at the corner of Bedford and Atlantic. It's a city landmark, but it's also a place where the Department of Homeless Services has a shelter, and there was a clear interest in how do we better use this space for other community amenities, like everything from a workforce development center to space for nonprofits to a recreation center. So we found that to be really, that was a really key part as well. Great. So before we dive into the zoning, we just wanted to take a second to ask and poll the audience, how many AAMUP engagement meetings have you attended? Whether this is your first one or you've attended a few or more than 3, that would be really helpful for us to know. Great. So I see a mix of responses, but definitely see like equal amount for a few and more than 3. All right. I think we definitely got a mix of folks. That's great. I'm glad that there are folks who were here for the first time. Well, all right. So now I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Jesse Hirakawa, to cover the land use and zoning portion of the presentation.
Thank you, Jonah. Yeah, continuing on. So as you see, the diagram on the left, as shown earlier, is the framework that was created back in 2018 as a response to the work that had started back in 2013. Jonah did talk about through these sub areas, so I'm not going to go through these again. But you'll notice on the empty map on the right, there are a bunch of callouts that was actually published in the Community Vision and Priorities report that we recently released. as really providing as kind of a summary and what we heard to recent land use and density concerns and suggestions that we heard during these sessions. You're going to notice kind of a range of comments, and to kind of just shout out a few, there were some comments from, you don't want anything to change on Atlantic Avenue, to we need to have the highest density possible on Atlantic Avenue, all the way to, really providing areas for mixed use opportunities. We should create opportunities for housing as much as possible, everywhere as possible, and providing active and useful ground floor uses for everyone. And maybe the last one I'll shout out is the Armory should explore opportunities for community-oriented resources and really build upon the existing resources for the individuals utilizing the Armory. And so, really as a response to all those comments, a revision to that framework was necessary, right? So you'll notice, in addition to the Atlantic Avenue mixed-use area in red, it's been expanded to cover a greater area along Atlantic Avenue. In the yellow areas, you'll notice that it's more strategically placed along the north-south avenues like Grand, Classen, and Franklin, really to have a more focus of greater density along these avenues as a connectors between, the north and south neighborhoods. Crossing Atlantic Avenue can be tough, and so we really see these north-south avenues to have some connection there. You'll notice in the middle, right, the new kind of yellow and purple striped hatched areas. These are really indirectly as a response to a lot of the feedback that we heard from the previous areas, where they were commenting about the purple areas that were prohibiting housing. And so really we're creating this more mixed use area, and as a transition area for a special mixed use area to allow for a variety of uses and not just have one focus, which I'm going to dig into this way more later. And lastly, you'll notice the purple area is identified around the Armory. And once again, I'll get into more details with that later. But really, we recognize that the framework from 2018 needed to be updated, and this is our proposed framework for that. And so before I get into those exact zoning districts that we're going to propose for the area, we want to see how those previous diagrams translate into building heights and densities and floor area stuff. So I want to break down a little bit about what zoning actually is, and so that we are all on the same page here. So zoning, like what is zoning, right? Zoning helps to regulate both what you can build and where you can build it, right? And so what you can build actually translates to these uses that we're going to talk about. And uses typically are separated into 4 topics. Residential, right, as in like homes, it's where we live, it's where we build apartments, where we build houses. There's commercial, and that has a wide range of uses, whether it's like grocery stores, hair salons, the typical day-to-day uses that we go to and walk to, while also has office spaces, right, where we can work and visit. The third use identified is community facilities, which really can typically mean, whether they're houses of worship or churches, schools, sometimes daycare locations, a variety of those, for example. Lastly, I'm going to call out industrial, which can really mean whether it's like manufacturing jobs or warehouses. It also means gas stations, maker spaces, workshops, and those types of uses. And so these uses are placed on a map to identify where these uses are allowed to be built, right? And so additionally, zoning regulates a few other items, which are kind of called out on the right. For example, how tall can a building be? Where does the building have to push and pull setback? Are there certain heights that the building needs to be cut into to allow more light and air access to the streets? Typically, we refer to those as kind of a zoning envelope, which you'll see later. I do want to bring attention to the item that says floor area ratio, which we typically call FAR, which you're going to hear about more in reference to lots when we talk about zoning. And so this really specifically calls out how much you can build, right? How much square footage is allowed to be built in relation to the area of that lot, right? And so the last thing I'll call out is zoning can regulate the ground floor streetscape conditions, like planting street trees, what kind of uses we want to see on the ground floor, right? What's happening there when we're walking along the sidewalk in our neighborhoods. However, there are several things that zoning cannot do, right? Zoning can't fix everything. But to name a few, zoning cannot require landowners or developers, to build on their land 100% housing or 100% affordable housing units. Zoning cannot control kind of the aesthetics or the materials, right, of buildings, like the architecture that's being proposed within these envelopes. And to name a few more, zoning cannot require the construction of new buildings or require businesses to locate within them, right? And additionally, zoning cannot require them to have like a certain number of bedrooms, right? And so, really translating all of that feedback and considerations from all the outreach we've done and moving forward, we did draft a few goals and features that will be proposed within these draft zonings. And so first, to address the housing shortage and support affordability needs, the zoning will create opportunities for new housing construction that will also include affordable income restricted housing. We can require income restricted housing through a tool that we call mandatory inclusionary housing, also known as MIH. And really that's to support a variety of affordability, especially deeper levels of affordability on city-owned sites. We want to encourage moderate to high density on key corridors. Additionally, coordinate with other citywide text amendments that some of you may have heard of, right, related to the City of Yes housing opportunities. Second, to create a mixed-use neighborhood for employment and housing. We want to require active ground floor uses on key corridors, create an incentive for mid-block job generating uses with housing above, really provide envelope flexibility, like what I was telling you about earlier, of where you can build inside for the developments that create a variety and mix of uses. And once again, coordinating with another citywide text that is more related to economic opportunity. Lastly and third, really to emphasize urban design and public road improvements. We want to enhance Atlantic Avenue streetscape for safety and stormwater management. We're looking to require a street wall setback along Atlantic Avenue and Bedford Avenue. Sometimes that's called like sidewalk widening. We want to require bulk envelope modifications to really allow for enhanced architecture and to accommodate a variety of uses. We're looking to eliminate off-street parking requirements and update loading regulations. Some of these are needing to be updated. And lastly, really looking to balance the need for housing with the existing context of the surrounding area. And so really the slide that we've all been waiting for, right? The zoning districts and numbers that we have. So in response to everything we've been talking, we're really excited to finally share these zoning districts and boundaries for a draft zoning proposal. I am going to note that looking at this map, we're looking at this entire area as a special district to really allow modifications in these changes that I have mentioned, right? Whether it's related to uses, parking, streetscape, building bulk and articulation, and which will be different for each subdistrict, which I'll go through. Additionally, I want to note that we're mapping mandatory inclusionary housing area, MIH, to require a share of the new housing to be permanently income restricted. And so we believe that these zoning actions are actually going to result in approximately 4,000 new housing units in the area. However, depending on which MIH option, the amount of permanently affordable income restricted units can vary between 1,100 to 1,500 of these units as a total. I'm going to use the next few slides to go through each subdistrict with a deeper breakdown. So the first area, Atlantic Avenue, right? It's a 120-foot wide street corridor with a mix of uses, typically auto-centric right now in character, and really see it as a divider, right, in crossing, whether it's multiple neighborhoods to the north and south related to, Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, Bed-Stuy, and Crown Heights and Prospect Heights. This is a transit-rich area, right? It's located near the subway along Fulton Street. There's LIRR access to the east at Nostrand Avenue. I know plenty of you are very familiar with this area. And really, with Atlantic Avenue, the goal is to promote more high density of zoning to allow for housing and other types of commercial uses with active ground floors with an improved streetscape. And so we're proposing a majority of Atlantic Avenue to be a C63A. And so you'll notice that there's a small portion dedicated to M15/R9A. From the residential standpoint, these are roughly the same. However, we did have to pair this area with an M district to allow the preservation for some manufacturing uses like the GMDC that's located there as well. And so apologies if it's a little technical, but this, the C63A district is a high density commercial district that allows buildings at a maximum height of 185 feet, typically 18 stories, with a mandated setback after 135 feet at a maximum FAR of 9. We really want to ensure that there's flexibility within this envelope to allow for interesting architecture and provide like bulk flexibility within the envelope for enhanced facades and building articulation treatments. This will have a mandatory ground floor use requirement, mandating, certain non-residential uses like a grocery store or a local hair salon or a gym even. And so really these everyday uses that are needed to be added since with the addition of homes being added to the area. And lastly, we're looking to add some special regulations related to the setback of buildings to really improve or effectively widen the sidewalk area. And recapping with this vision along Atlantic Avenue, this proposed district is going to maximize housing at high densities, which will create opportunities for income-restricted housing and support non-residential uses along the ground floor. In addition to having flexible bulk envelopes, having opportunities for balconies and recessions and the push and pull within the building, really allowing architects to play with the design to, really create unique buildings for the area, among other uses that are listed here on the right. Moving south of Atlantic Avenue, we're looking at the mid-blocks between kind of Grand Avenue and Franklin Avenue, and also the northeast area above Atlantic Avenue, Herkimer Place. With the goal to incentivize the creation of mixed-use developments with affordable housing and a variety of non-residential uses to support job growth. I want to first note for zoning district kind of notation, you're going to notice that it says M1 and then parentheses 4, right? And so really this is stating actually that we're looking at creating specific floor area ratio FAR amounts within M1 districts. So in this case, the M14, right, is proposing 4 FAR of non-residential uses. You'll see the parentheses number vary as we move forward. And so the next portion, the special mid-block mixed-use area, this mid-block area, we're looking to provide a preference for a higher non-residential FAR to really encourage a mixed-use building in a more dynamic envelope to allow more room for unique and articulated architecture. And so in an M14, R6A district, we're proposing the residential FAR first only at 3.9. And then next, 4 FAR for non-residential buildings, whether it's office or commercial uses. And the last one you'll see at the bottom, really to unlock this incentive of 5 FAR, which is more, you have to use both of these uses to get access to this extra FAR, right? You're going to notice in all of the dashed lines, the proposed envelope has a maximum height of 125 and a maximum base of 95 feet. So you'll notice that the buildings inside the envelopes are smaller, right, within the envelope, and this is done on purpose, really, to provide flexibility within this envelope. Once again, really to allow that building to be comfortable inside of it. Looking more northeast, northeast of Atlantic Avenue, Bedford Avenue, Herkimer Place. Some of you may be familiar. It's a very unique and probably one of the most narrowest streets in the project area, with a variation of small lots. And so we're proposing to apply the same type of incentive as I was just discussing earlier. Different districts, but M13 paired with an R6B district. And you can see in the dashed line, it has a proposed max height of 95 feet with a base height of 65 feet, really allowing for, once again, a flexible envelope. And this is really also in response to some of the outreach we've heard and the communications we've had with some of the community boards as well. And so once again, you'll notice that the buildings inside the envelopes are roughly smaller to allow for really flexible types of interesting architecture within the proposed envelope. And so within these districts, you're going to have 2.4 FAR for only residential, 3 for non-residential, and then keeping the 3 FAR for if you create a mixed-use building that has a mix of uses, right? A non-residential ground floor, basically the same mechanism I just mentioned on the previous slide. And really, this is a summary reference. There are 2 special mixed-use districts in this area that we're proposing for 2 different unique areas. Yeah. And so, once again, I'm going to continue this earlier. To emphasize these plenty questions, I want to take this moment to allow for participation before I finish out the zoning districts. So, given all of this speaking of, mandatory and flexible uses on the ground floor, what is possible, really would love to hear responses from you all. What type of uses and businesses should be in this area, next to new apartments or within same buildings that have new apartments as well? Right, I'm seeing the first 2. You all can see it. We have grocery stores and schools, recreation. That's great. All of these are permitted under all of the proposed zoning I've talked so far. Arts and community spaces, affordable childcare, anything that serves us, anything that will employ. Yes, and so a lot of these uses that that zoning can provide, at the base, at the ground floor of apartments, really is possible. A lot of these uses are restaurants, jobs, daycares. These are all uses that are permitted in our proposed zoning so far. Green economy, job generating industrial, yes, right. All of these uses are permitted within our mixed district, right? That was a response to having M uses, like the M next to a residential use, right? Really seeing grocery stores be an ample one, along with gas stations and schools. Awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate all those uses, and we have 3 more districts to get through, so I appreciate everyone's patience. But all these uses are very great and definitely possible in a lot of these proposed zoning districts. And so, moving on to the North-South Avenues, we're looking at another mixed-use district right here, looking at Grand Avenue, Classen Avenue, Franklin Avenue, Bedford Avenue, all real neighborhood connectors at the street level. And so, with the goal to have mixed-use developments with active ground floor uses and housing above, we're looking to propose an M1-4 district paired with R7D along Classen and Grand, and C45D along Bedford Avenue north of Atlantic. These are actually pretty equivalent districts in relation to residential FARs. And so the first one, M14 R7D zoning district, allows for mixed-use buildings at a 5.6 FAR or a non-residential building at 4 FAR. You'll notice that building only residential building is not possible. So these types of areas, you will need to have some type of non-residential use on the bottom, many that were mentioned earlier with residential above. And so you'll notice that there's a maximum height of 125 feet with a second base setback height of 95 feet. And really, given the nature of these avenues, most of these lots are corner conditions, like pretty large lots, right, resulting in a lot of flexible room within these envelopes. Moving on to the Bedford Atlantic Armory, where some of you know it's an LPC designated landmark. We're looking at this area for one specific zoning district only for this site. And that zoning district is an M14, really with two goals in mind, right? As a direct result from the outreach we've had, in short term, we really want to bring the Armory into greater compliance with zoning to provide more flexibility for potential renovations, right, with inside. In the medium to long term, really want to allow for potential future community orientated uses within the building and explore potential for affordable housing also within the building. This proposal is not proposing to change or get rid of the existing shelter use that's happening right now. The last section, so thank you for bearing with me. We're actually proposing another area for sole purpose of just residential. And so that's going to be shown in two different areas, an R7D district and an R7A district, two different locations, really to maximize affordable housing opportunities on city-owned sites and nonprofitly owned sites. The first one is R7D, a little bit more to the west, which between around Dean and Bergen, really presenting R7D, which permits buildings at a maximum height of 125 with a maximum FAR of 5.6. This is really in direct response to some key recommendations from the community vision and priorities report, and also previously ongoing RFP work that was released from HPD as really as a down payment to the city. And if you recall a few weeks ago, as I just mentioned, right, the city had announced a designation for the first site at 542 Dean Street. And so we'll be staying tuned for more future updates on the other site actually as well. The second only residential portion, which is south of the Armory, we're proposing an R7A portion, which is also in response to a former homeless and transitional housing site that is currently vacant. And so we're looking to work with Acacia Network, which is an NYC-based nonprofit, to figure out how we can develop at least 100 affordable housing units on that existing site. And so thank you again for all your patience on the zoning proposal. I really appreciate it. Before moving on to the question and answer portion, there's a few things that we want to share with you in relation to next steps and other components to the neighborhood study. And so, the Department of City Planning's capital planning team really supports neighborhood studies and plans that are identifying capital project investment opportunities that are really helping drive interagency coordination, right? Because it takes multiple agencies to really work on this as a whole city. And so example capital projects that support, different economic development or social services, or even including streetscape improvements for commercial areas. These are all really investments that we are continuously working on and trying to coordinate, and also as a response to ongoing outreach. Other capital projects that we can include is really, supporting different public realm improvements, whether it's to streetscapes, open spaces, and really include improvements to neighborhood parks or other development to plazas. Really this process has three main components. Right. And so the first one is really preparing to understand the current neighborhood assets and community priorities, and also continuously participating in public engagement like these workshops to continue capture ideas. Right. We've worked with WXY and Councilmember Hudson on the past 9 months on some of those, but also looking at there's plenty of more future ones that we're going to be looking at for engagement. Lastly, really following up on these engagements to start compiling like an actual list of investment opportunities with information on, whether it relates to scope, what are the benefits, what are the costs, really to inform and support an ultimate neighborhood plan. And so, additionally, pursuant to a local law 175 back in 2016, the city is responsible for publishing a list of capital and programmatic commitments, right? Whatever the results of that I previously just talked about, but those results that were associated to a neighborhood scale rezoning, which is this, we're also in charge of having an annual progress report detailing the status of all the initiatives that are going to be stated. I'm going to caveat that this tracker for AAMUP is created at the end of the process, right? Once all of those commitments are, put together. closer to the adoption of the plan. However, if you want to get a preview of previous neighborhood plans, this tracker is available publicly for anyone that wants to review it. You can, the link is kind of long here, but if you look up online NYC rezoning commitment tracker, you can find it. Additionally, as an update, recognizing that the HPD, Dean Street, and Bergen Streets outreach was happening before AAMUP. It was part of it was around the Crown area that was previously discussed, but really looking at how do we work together on ongoing citywide initiatives, right? Really to continue adding more housing for low income homeless seniors, right, on this city-owned lot. And so we're going to stay tuned for the next one and really working together to make sure that we're having a cohesive vision together. Additionally, many have asked about updates for Atlantic Avenue and a redesign, right? And so we are excited to say that we are working with our sister agencies like DOT on the capital and programmatic improvements over the next couple of months, where we really will continue to engage the public for more of what these investments look like, right? And as a beginning and a response to this outreach, we foresee a lot of potential on how this re-envisioning can happen, right? As a response to the zoning changes for a holistic plan, whether it's from safety improvements, more landscaping, more tree coverage, wider sidewalks, and really focusing on any type of improvements here. And we really look forward to working with you all on figuring out what this should be. Additionally, we're going to continue to explore more opportunities with our sister agencies like the Parks Department for new and existing open space improvements, improving tree cover, really building upon existing capital improvements like the Lower Triangle area, and exploring ideas on how we can consider expanding amenities and landscaping. More to the east, like previously mentioned, we're excited to continue engagement and collaboration with local stakeholders and community boards on improvements related to St. Andrew's Playground. At a high level, I wanted to state a few next steps related to zoning and other neighborhood components. Really just doubling down, I want everyone to know that we're continuing ongoing community outreach. We want to, and interagency coordination on the city level, city services, and other projects and initiatives. We're going to continue to identify and develop specific capital planning and programmatic investments, continue to coordinate with HPD and local stakeholders on affordable housing preservation and tenant support needs, advance any non-zoning related like economic and workforce development priorities, and also the environmental review, which is going to happen, it's kicking off very soon with the release of a draft scope of work and holding a scoping meeting, which is tentative for October 17. And so this is the last slide I promised before getting to the question and answers. This is a little bit more detailed of showing of the previous slide of where we're headed and what these next steps are. And I really want to highlight all of the opportunities that we will have to continue in joining in any public meetings in different variety forms. And so after sharing the draft zoning, which is today, we plan to release information regarding the scope of the environmental review, which will really include a scoping meeting on October 17. You could see it on top there in green, where the public is going to have a chance to weigh in and testify on topics that should be analyzed and studied as part of a draft environmental impact statement, or DEIS. After scoping, it typically takes roughly 8 months to complete the draft environmental impact statement, which occurs in tandem with plenty of other technical work, such as drafting the zoning text, putting together a land use application. And during this coming fall and winter, we also hope to plan to continue outreach with the steering committee and broader public with a focus on the capital and programmatic investments that I had just talked about, topics related to streets, open space improvements, housing resources, job and income development, job and economic development, and in topics, planning, really hoping to flesh out proposals in collaboration with all of our agency partners that can support this AAMUP process. As you can see, in spring of 2024, once the draft EIS is ready to be released and the land use application is complete, we're going to start the formal public review process, also known as ULURP, which includes reviews by the community boards, the borough president, city planning commission, city council, and also they will equally also hold their own public meetings, public hearings. And so, based on where we are now and today, we anticipate starting this ULURP process in mid to late spring of 2024 with an adoption of the plan later that year. And so before we get to the Q&A, we're actually hoping to get your feedback on 2 more questions, really looking forward, moving forward, and how we can improve on today and how we can improve moving forward, really. And so, what planning topics, issues, and priorities should we focus on the next phase of AAMUP, right? My colleague Jonah and I did share a lot of information today, and so we're really hoping to, continuously improve and add more. Impacts on traffic, ADA accessibility, sustainable transportation. Yes, a lot of these will be analyzed in the environmental analysis stage for scoping. I'm seeing faster in a crisis. I'm assuming maybe that's like faster responses, right? The city to respond faster to anything that's any crises that are happening. Yes. I'm seeing defending tenants. Yes, we are working with our partners at HPD for tenant resources and how that could be part of this plan. Well, the texts are getting small. Density of Bergen, density of Dean. Yes, we can talk more about that in more detailed zoning conversations. Yes, a lot of these topics are all great. I think kill the rats. Yes, I think these are all great topics that are easily talked about. And we are having our next meeting is in person, and we plan to invite a lot of individuals to really be able to talk about all of these topics. So we're gonna obviously take a screenshot of this and save this so that we can definitely try to acknowledge all of these topics at our next meetings. Thank you. Last one. That was on the what. This is on the who, right? Who should we contact for our next in-person event? Like which individual should we be reaching out to, right? We've been working with the council member's office and other sister agencies to really get the word out, and relying on a lot of local stakeholders. But you are all the local experts. You are all on the ground. You all know who is important. I'm seeing there's a delay. Who should we contact? Ethel Tias, DOT, people who might move to the neighborhood, the mayor, those on this call, block association flyers to apartment blogs, homeowners. Yes. And also, we would love your feedback for how to reach those individuals as well, right? We working with the council member, we do our best to, there's like live Twitter announcements. We have a website actually where you can enter emails for active updates. We do our best to update the emails or update our website. Landowners. Yeah, if you have any recommendations for how to reach out to these landowners, we are very open to these. And yes, and on the last slide, we're going to have, these are all wonderful individuals that we should be recommending out to. And we can definitely work with our local officials and steering committee members to how to have them engaged in all of the next events. So I think this question can stay, so feel free to keep adding them. Even though it's not on the screen, you can continue entering them. Awesome. And so I do want to thank you all so much for staying on so long. It is 8 p.m. and we do want to have this chance to have a question and answer. Really, I'm going to invite my other colleagues from the Brooklyn office to jump on and to help facilitate this question and answer.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for your time. We know it is almost 8:05. And again, we really appreciate your energy, passion, and just overall attentiveness to this. So we've received a few questions regarding this project, this rezoning. And the first one that we received, is there a reason why the rezoning area stopped short of Nostrand Avenue? Are there any plans to undertake a similar plan farther east? Is it a matter of time?
Kyra, I can take a stab at that. I'll just say that we tried to go to the boundary of the M11 district, and the area that was just by the Nostrand Avenue station was recently rezoned as part of the on the north side as part of the Bed-Stuy South rezoning in 2007, and then on the south side is part of the 2013 Crown Heights West rezoning. That portion is also very built up too, so we wanted to be sensitive of the current housing that's already there.
Great, thanks so much. I see that Alvaro Gonzalez has a question as well.
Yes, hello. My name is Alvaro Gonzalez, Local 79 organizer. I've been to almost all the meetings that have been happening. I saw that on the community recommendations, you guys did have a 40 an hour dollar, wage thing. But from our point of view, we wanted to make it more clearer that the community should have $40 an hour specific to construction too, just because a lot of times when contractors or developers say, oh yeah, we're paying $40 an hour, they'll try to throw in their staff management into there. Like, yeah, they're making over $40, but what about the construction workers? They need to be making $40 an hour too, as a wage floor.
Thanks for your comment, Alvaro. That's really helpful for us.
Great, thanks so much. We really appreciate your feedback. We do have another question from our Q&A. An earlier slide misrepresented parking, showing one of a few unaffordable parking lots that are typically hard to sell to private developers, or held to sell to private developers. The plan doesn't seem to address how increased density in projects like city bikes or the terrible construction on Underhill are reducing parking for long-term residents. How will this project consider parking needs?
It's a really good question, and I think it's a good note to just explain where we are right now in the process. I think those are the type of questions that we hope to fully answer as we're working closely with DOT as we do our environmental review. So I think we'll start taking a look at that. If you want to offline share just more specifics about those conflicts, that's something we can kind of start to look at right away.
Great, thanks, Jonah. Mike Jones has a question. Would you like to come up?
Yeah, good evening. DCP, I mean, this is a agency from the state, right? The city or the 5 boroughs? I just want to know. I didn't hear about you guys. I just like to know
We're
more.
a city agency.
I see. All right. Did you guys have anything to do with Underhill? As far as the changes that just happened in the last couple of months?
The chicanes and the bike boulevard?
The bike boulevard and the chaos that's going on in there. Did you guys have anything to do with that?
Not directly, but we are that is a sister agency, the Department of Transportation, or DOT. And so we are coordinating with them more broadly, but that is a separate project.
Okay, yeah. I mean, obviously, there's a couple of us on the call. We're getting like late minutes. My thing is, I'm just one of the voice. I'm the president of the St. John's Block Association between Washington and Underhill. I've been in the community for 50 years. There have been very few engagements as far as things of that nature. And I mean, this conversation seems kind of similar where there are things that are happening in the community that affects more than just a couple of blocks, but whole neighborhoods. Like Underhill is affecting not only the 45 bus that's going towards the west of Brooklyn. It's horrible. And we have to pray for the parents, the teachers, and the students for this week with the way Underhill has been handled in the past couple of weeks and the way how an unused block from Underhill from Atlantic Avenue has been cut off, which isn't saving anybody. The Underhill has been fined for the last 60, 70 years. And, you know, we're just a little exhausted of things happening with no real hands and touch on with the community. And that's what we're asking questions in this chat, like where are these surveys being held? We're not understanding what's going on. Things we have elderly and disabled who are not able to come on these Zooms. They don't get a chance to voice what's happening. And that's the sad part because they are the ones who are being more affected than the group that we're seeing here. We're seeing a group of, you know, good 30 from 30 to 55, but this is just not a right thing because there are people who are being affected. But emergency vehicles will not be able to get towards through Underhill from and God forbid if you live on Underhill between Atlantic and Pacific, you're going to be, it's hard. 77%, 78% is against it. The both firehouses are against Underhill, and that's just one situation. I don't know how Atlantic Avenue. I'm definitely going to look more into it. I just got the information of getting the call in, so I'm just really just voicing out some things that I'm just hoping that the doc we appreciate this open forum, and I'm hoping that the public one that you have coming up next, that we can be informed so we can pretty much get more people that's being affected to really come out because people are not all technology savvy, and it's just we're having thousands of people in 11238 just alone that's being affected by these changes, and we really need everybody to be handled. And I think and we need our representatives. We need to get and Crystal, I see you text me. You can get my number. We've been hitting your office for the past couple of weeks. There's some very serious issues that need to be handled. I don't want to overstep my 3 minutes, but I'm just saying it has to be fair and balanced to the community and not just the several few, because there was an organization that's a non-fundraiser. I'm not going to mention the name, that's been having a hand on things and nobody's agreeing with what's happening, and it's been under the table, and it's sad, and it's horrific right now. We are traumatized of Underhill alone, so we're just hoping that we don't get a repeat with the what's going on with Atlantic Avenue, and I'm just hoping that you get a chance to hear most of us like me who've been here for 40, 50, 60 years. And I'm going to yield my mic, and I thank you guys again.
I'll just say thank you so much for voicing that. I'll echo what Councilmember Crystal Hudson said, that we would love to speak with you as well and better understand those issues. So maybe we can also connect separately. But thank you for speaking about that.
Great, thank you so much for your input. We have another question from our Q&A. How is affordability how is it used and defined in these slides?
So affordability is, I'll say when it comes to MIH, or mandatory inclusionary housing, it's quite defined by law. So usually the federal government or the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, they set the general parameters for what's called AMI, or area median income. That's generally set at the federal level. It's based on usually like a city or a housing market as a whole. And then at the local level, we set certain standards for the target AMIs, or area median incomes. So for example, MIH requires that either a percentage between 20 to 30% of all housing in new units are affordable at different AMIs, which can range from 40% to generally 80%. There are a few options above 80%, but they're not as frequently used. And so that's kind of what we use as our main metrics for affordability. And then that doesn't include other tax-based programs and city subsidies or term sheets that are used to finance affordable housing.
Thanks so much, Jonah. We have a question from the audience from Theor Ortiz Joyner. Please join the stage.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to bring attention to the slide that indicated the decrease in the Black population, because that slide really resonated with me. And I was wondering if DCP could answer or say yay or nay, because I believe there's a correlation with the decline of the Black population and development, because seems to happen to me that DCP city planning is planning for people who are non-Black and less affluent, because what we really need is housing that's affordable for the people who are here, not housing for people who have a choice to live anywhere that they want to come and take those places over. So I'm wondering, how are you planning for the people who are here, who have been here for generations, as opposed to people who just want to live in New York City or experience Brooklyn for a little while?
Thank you for that question. I'll say that there are a lot of factors and issues that are going on. We do recognize that new development has occurred. We have Pacific Park. There are a lot of new developments that were approved by past private applications or as part of neighborhood plans or contextual rezonings, especially during the era in the Michael Bloomberg administration. That being said, I do want to call attention. There has been increasing data showing that new development doesn't always directly correlate with either displacement on a larger scale, or and that new development can just satisfy a basic need for supporting housing growth, and in many cases can ease pressure off of the existing housing stock. I'll put a finer point in that we all know that displacement gentrification, that's a major topic of concern for anyone that's been living in and around this area for many years. What we find is that there's just tremendous demand to live here, and it's not always because people want to live in a new development or not. It's just the demand exists, and by allowing more room for some growth and allowing a portion of that growth be permanently affordable, especially in an area that's industrial, that doesn't allow any new housing, we feel is part of the solution. And that doesn't mean that MIH or new development is going to solve every issue. I think we're looking at this as like, let's try to put every single tool, every resource that we have. And so that's the other piece that we want to focus on is how do we support nearby tenants that we know are facing these issues today, whether there's new development or not. And so I hope that answers your question. I do think that this is a topic that we as a department can speak more about, and we can maybe spend more time talking about housing resources as well.
If I may, and no offense, but I just think that that's just really the status quo answer. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jonah. Appreciate your time on this. We do have an additional question on the question and answer portion. Why are sidewalks being widened by requiring setbacks instead of building the sidewalk further into the street right of way?
Yeah, I can address that. Sorry, Jonah. I didn't know if you were going to jump in. Yeah, the question pertaining to, widening sidewalks along buildings or going into the street right of way. I think, I think there's two parts to that answer, right? One, I mentioned the building setbacks because that is regulated by zoning, right? Zoning can do that, right? We can look at those emphases to figure that as a tool that we have available from the department. And in terms of going into the street right of way, like going the other way, that's not zoning, right? So that's why we didn't say that. That doesn't mean that it's not possible though, right? And so that is an ongoing conversation in relation to working with sister agencies like DOT and the city at large on how we address that. And so by stating that what we can do with zoning doesn't mean that we're precluding the full opportunity for going the other way. Great question, though. I appreciate that one.
Thanks so much, Jesse. We do have a question from Jib Bacone. Would you like to go on stage, please?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Gib Voconi. I'm a member of CBA. I've been facilitating the M-Crown plan for about the M-Crown discussions at CBA for about 10 years. I'd like to just make a couple comments comparing what we've been presented tonight with the M-Crown plan. The first one I'm going to make is relative to the comment earlier about displacement. The community board is extremely concerned about displacement. We were concerned about it in 2014 when AAMUP began, and we're even more concerned about it now. The components of displacement, when you look at it statistically, are certainly race, but also income and college education. So the M-Crown vision had two components, one of which is affordable housing that meets the needs of people who live in the community. And the second one is employment for people who live in the community who do not have a college education. There are a number of ways we look to accomplish that. One of them is by preserving manufacturing space in the M-Crown district to be able to have employment among firms that offer jobs that are career jobs to people who don't have a college education. I want to mention that relative to the 2018 framework that Jonah presented earlier, the framework we got this evening eliminates almost 1 million square feet of manufacturing use from the 2018 framework to this one, which is a significant amount of manufacturing space that won't be here in favor of housing. I want to mention that the presentation we have tonight included mapping MIH option 2 throughout the residential rezoning area. And that's an 80% AMI option. So many of those units will not be affordable to the people that we've been trying to reach in Community District 8 to prevent displacement. Those are serious concerns. I also want to mention the other tool that the community board looked for creating jobs is set-asides and incentives for light industrial uses that produce jobs accessible to people without a college education. And this proposal does not include any of those incentives. I want to say that the slide 31 and 33 that we saw earlier that show the community board resolution, which was drafted by me, does specifically call for those incentives and set-asides. When Mayor Eric Adams was borough president, he also called for those incentives and set-asides. They appear in the AAMUP final report as community recommendations. The Department of City Planning has implemented zoning districts in Gowanus that include them. And developers who've done private applications in the M-Crown zone over the last several years have also agreed to those set-asides in discussions with the community board and the city council member. So there is no there is no justification in my mind for them not to appear in this zoning. And it's something I think everyone can expect to hear more about from the community board as this process moves forward. I'm supportive of seeing additional housing being created in the zone, but we need to focus on ways to deliver as much as possible at levels of deep affordability if we want to have any impact on displacement here. Thank you.
Thanks so much. We appreciate your statement and time on this again. Next question, excuse me. Regarding the Dean and Bergen Street rezoning, does that new rezoning apply to other sites beyond the 2 city-owned sites?
And take that. So the answer is yes. So when we think of rezoning boundaries, we don't just include a single site. It kind of has to fit within a broader framework for the zoning map and what's appropriate. And so we part of the rationale for the higher density on the sites, in addition to being important opportunities to support deeply affordable housing, is that those sites are close to public transit. And so when we haven't drawn specific boundaries yet, but we're thinking of extending the boundaries closer to 6th Avenue in a way that connects to the higher density along Flatbush Avenue. So that's kind of what our intent was there.
Great, thanks so much, Juno. Next question by Mimi Mitchell. Would you like to come up on stage? Mimi Mitchell, are you there?
I am here. Yeah, here we go. I just wanted to get back to I actually have 2 questions. One is also in the chat, but we'll go with this one here. I wanted to get back to, I think it was a gentleman by the name of Jonah, when Ms. Fior Ortiz asked him about displacement. I wanted to make sure that I was hearing you correctly. Did Jonah say that development doesn't necessarily cause displacement, and that's what he's been seeing from the new research? I wanted just to confirm that one first.
I'll just say that I can also put some of the research in the chat, but I'll say that every block, every building is different, but citywide, there has been research showing that new development, when you're increasing the supply of housing, where there is strong demand, that doesn't directly cause displacement unless it's directly replacing a building on site, like a redevelopment of a site itself.
Okay, so your claim in this process is that the new developments are not going to cause displacement because there hasn't been housing on those sites already. As a member of CHTU and as a member of Community Board 8 and as a member of this community for over 15 years, almost 20 years, let me tell you, your research, I don't know the research, I'm sorry, I haven't read it, but I can tell you by firsthand, it's flawed. Do you think that 20,000 Black people have left this community in this district over the last 10 years because they just felt like going to Florida, felt like going to North Carolina or wherever it is? Is that what you guys are thinking? No, that's displacement. And that even includes when things were not built, when housing was built on empty lots. It's displacement. It's secondary displacement, but displacement all the same. So I just found it really disheartening, upsetting, infuriating that you would use that research when the numbers clearly show you different. You guys showed us the numbers. You showed us the numbers. I'm looking at your numbers. Your numbers show a rapid and dramatic decline of people of color. And those numbers have been taken over and increased by white people. Just going to say it. So if you don't think that that is displacement or what displacement looks like when we look at numbers, I'm here to tell you that that's exactly what it looks like. That is displacement. And what's going on Atlantic Avenue, even this meeting right here, there are landlords who are already lining up to displace more tenants. That neighborhood right now has the highest amount of eviction actions in housing court in comparison to the last 3 to 4 years. And it keeps and continually rises. So I guess I'm just saying that to you because I really want you guys to understand that regardless of if it's being built, if housing's being added on an empty lot or housing's being added on a lot that was already there, we need this community Board 8 needs deeply affordable housing. We need people who live and work in this community to actually be able to afford to live here also. That is what we need. And we need people of color to be restored back into this community. This community used to be a beautiful mix. It used to be vital. It used to be a community that we could all feel comfortable in. This community is now what, I think 60, 70% white. And if we look at what the income levels are, the average Black family in Brooklyn is making 50 grand a year. The average white family in Brooklyn is making 120 grand a year. You don't think that that's displacement? Your research doesn't think that that's displacement? Clearly, Black people are getting displaced for richer, whiter folk. And we need you to help us stop that. We need that to stop. And the people here need a place to live that they can afford. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. And Jonah, please look at that research a little differently if you don't mind. Thanks.
Thanks, Mia.
Thanks, Mimi. We really appreciate your energy and your feelings on this. Truly appreciated. Our next question is, you mentioned that nearby contextual zonings have limited opportunity for housing growth over the past decade or so. Are there any plans to reconsider those areas for additional housing growth?
I'll say we're really, focused on AAMUP and the needs for that area. And, at the moment we're not planning to upzone or expand the boundaries largely. I think where we are doing that, we're thinking of a very targeted way, speaking to kind of the issues that Mimi raised about the need for affordable housing and supporting tenants. So where we are doing that, it's in areas like by the Dean and Bergen sites, or some other sites nearby that can accommodate deep affordable housing. So that's kind of what we're focused on.
Thanks so much, Jonah. Can you please explain how or why the FAR and bulk you present is different from what a typical R6A or 9 AAQ would allow?
Jesse, do you want to take this one?
Oh, sure. Yeah, seeing some other questions related to this and, responding that as a whole, as part of I mentioned earlier, really the city of housing opportunity, which is the citywide zoning changes that are happening. We're looking at updating the citywide regulations for both capacity and affordability, right, as a larger initiative from the citywide. And so AAMUP and in coordination even though AAMUP is more detailed, we have to work together with the citywide initiatives as well. And so there's going to be more details on that coming forward, but that's why some of you may notice that those numbers are slightly different.
So much, Jesse. We do have someone in the crowd, Sarah Lazur. Would you like to come up on stage? So, Sarah Lazur, great.
Oh. Hi, not sure. Okay, this is working. Yeah, I had put this question into the Q&A and had asked it earlier. I had asked, when are the city council members going to do something are going to introduce legislation to fix MIH? Because I think a very commonly heard refrain during all of these meetings for AAMUP was that MIH is simply not sufficient to meet the urgent need for deeply affordable housing. And additionally, respectfully, it's not like when your landlord displaces you by either raising your rent by $500, says, oh, it's specifically because of 1010 Pacific or whatever. But all of us who are tenant activists and organizers in the neighborhood recognize the fact that they do cite rising costs when they are displacing people. Additionally, the attacks on rent stabilization mean that demolition plans are one of the few ways that you can get people out of a rent stabilized building, and people are doing that now. Landlords are still trying to deregulate in this area. But so anyway, a lot of people, if you ask any normal New Yorker, what would be the fair percentages? And most people think that MIH should be flipped on its head, right? That it should be 80% truly affordable and maybe 20 or 30% a market rate in order to subsidize or whatever. And yet nothing has been done about MIH since its inception in 2013. And so, Mr. Paul said something in the chat about it not being a legislative issue. It's a zoning text amendment issue. So I was hoping that the people who are involved in this process because honestly, a lot of tenants are at their wits' ends. They don't know what's going to happen. And they think, if all of this community engagement process, people were telling you over and over, I can't afford what people want to build, what are you going to do to, limit the cost of what people want to build? We need to know if that's going to happen, or if all of this was just shouting into the wind. So I hope that wasn't too long, but people care about this.
No, thank you so much, Sarah. I'm going to just invite Suri Plotkin, who's actually the director of neighborhood planning at HPD, to speak a little more about this too.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. We, of course, heard loud and clear from AAMUP residents throughout the entire process that affordable housing is the #1 priority, and that there is a strong desire from folks that we really kind of think creatively about the tools here and push for the deepest and widest affordability that we can. And that is what we're working on. I think what, we really want to highlight, of course, is that, as you've been hearing throughout the presentation, MIH is one of the main tools that we do have available, meaning, a portion of new buildings being required to be affordable, income restricted, permanently affordable housing. There's, hear you on kind of like the limits of the existing tool. There's, there are some citywide considerations around how we can, deepen and expand affordability. What Brian Paul was referring to is that, of course, this does go, like what you're referring to are kind of issues that are bigger than this neighborhood alone and this rezoning alone. And so some of the fundamental changes to kind of change the affordability levels within MIH, that is kind of a citywide zoning change that would need to happen. And that is something that the city's currently, exploring and trying to see where we can, potentially push the envelope there. You may be familiar with the city's zoning for housing opportunity, citywide text amendment. And so, stay tuned and kind of keep tabs on that citywide conversation. And when it comes to the kind of deep needs here that we've been hearing out throughout the whole process, hearing about tonight, it's, also really focusing on our public sites. You already heard about the Dean and Bergen sites, where HPD is building 100% affordable housing that will be targeted to more deeply affordable, a more deeply affordable population than MIH can target. And we're, trying to identify other additional public sites in the area that can help us reach that deeper affordability goal too.
Great, thank you so much, Sheree. Sharon, would you like to come up on stage? Sharon Kinney?
I certainly will. How's everyone doing this evening? Hello.
Hello, we're good, thank you. Sorry.
Very good. So I have two issues here. Everyone's tiptoeing around the problem of affordability. This city doesn't give a damn about poor people, because if they did, they wouldn't allow landlords to continue to build housing and put a share of low income apartments in those buildings. If you build a structure like they're building on Atlantic Avenue with 100 apartments, and you set aside 20 apartments for low income families, you're doing nothing to clear the shelters of these working families that just can't afford to live in the city that they grew up in. And that's disgusting. Okay, all the land use moving forward should be for low income housing only. If this city truly cared about its citizens and the poor people that have been displaced by the greedy landlords, then that's what they would do. Okay, I'm a broker in this city. I've been living on Eastern Parkway facing the museum for 50 years. And I've seen my community flip from brown and Black people to predominantly white, because we're decided upon. We have no input into or say so into what happens in our community, mainly because we don't get involved like we should, but mainly because we're low income, and the only people that get listened to or heard from are the people who donate or are bought and paid for, or can afford to buy and pay these politicians. And we don't know who that is. So let's not tiptoe around the main issue. Why would the city pay $4,000 a month to a hotel owner for a room for a family when they can subsidize an apartment for $1,000 for a family, getting them out of the shelter? It makes absolutely no sense to me. I should be the damn mayor. My second issue is Underhill. I know, Mike Jones, you touched on this topic, but because we have DCP, and I don't know if anyone from DOT is on this meeting tonight, but I want someone to explain to me the rationale behind putting a diamond in the middle with a huge ass planter in the middle of the street. The fire department comes down Underhill Avenue and they bust through the barricades, getting to an emergency. How is that rational in this city? I'm quite sure you've heard from the fire department, the police department, the handicapped, the elderly. In the meeting that we had at the church last month, so many people came out, but not one person from the city bothered to show their faces to hear our complaints. And it's truly disgusting. We pay taxes too. It may not be as much as older people pay. You got a handful of homeowners who want the blocks closed for foot traffic. There's no damn foot traffic once the school lets out. We've had businesses come to that meeting and say that their businesses weren't affected by vehicular traffic. It's more affected by the fact that the streets are closed. So who are you all listening to? You put parking spaces for zip cars and take away parking for the residents. What sense does that make? It's harmful to us. We want something done about it, and we're not backing down. We're not, and we have to go sit in Eric Adams' office. We're not backing down. I come off of Eastern Parkway. I make a right onto Underhill Avenue. I can no longer make a left on St. John's to head towards Plaza Street. Why? It's a two-way street. And then on top of that, you go 2 more blocks down, the direction of the traffic changes. It's no longer a two-way street. It's a one-way street with 2 blocks coming north. And after that, the rest going south to a block that's unused. You have tables and chairs in the middle of the street and no damn restaurants around the place. Make it make sense. Somebody on here, please explain to me what was the rationale behind all those changes you made? Because the residents went to sleep one night and woke up the next morning to no standing signs, parking tickets. The disrespect is intolerable, and we will not stand for it anymore. So what happened with Underhill? Can someone explain that to me?
Thank you for that. I'll just say that we will follow up with DOT. We're generally aware of the Bike Boulevard project, but don't have all of the details. I see some folks in the chat have spoken a little about that. So let us maybe check with our colleagues at DOT, and we can.
DOT should have been on this call tonight because we can't get through. We have a lot of unanswered questions, and we want action. We demand action. The time for talking is over. It makes absolutely no sense. I thought it was just a thing for the summer due to the COVID. Let the children play in the street. Then school started back. They were allowed to go back into schools, and the barricades were still there. I started calling DOT from that point on. They told me, oh, the vehicular traffic was affecting the businesses. I'm like, okay, it doesn't make sense, but okay. Now we understand that it's adversely affecting the businesses, having those barricades there. So it has to make sense. The DOT should have been on this call tonight. That's all I have to say.
Thank you again. I just want to let everybody know it's getting late. I think maybe we have time for 1 or more questions, and then we do want to wrap up. Does that sound okay, Kyra? Or
Yeah, I think we just had one more question actually. It was to get a better sense of what the next steps are.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe if we're able to get the presentation back up then.
Which slide would you like, Jesse?
This one makes sense.
Okay, great.
I think as this is getting put up, I'll just state that, we recognize that this is kind of the first virtual kind of meeting that we've kind of had, but also kind of continuing the ongoing outreach. There is a follow-up meeting that we're looking at having, which is going to be in person, right? We recognize we want to do virtual and in person, right? Both to make sure we're capturing everyone as possible. It's kind of kicking off a lot more in-person or virtual meetings. We don't have an exact date yet for that. But we do want to, there's been a lot of questions about how do you stay in touch? How do you kind of continue? And I want to state that there's multiple ways. At the end of the slides, we have different email addresses, or whether it's the council members emailing blast, or city planning also has an email blast that we can partake in. And currently that's the other way we have to kind of get the information out. We do want to hand it off to the council member, but before that, I want to double check with Jonah if there was anything else we wanted to state on this slide.
I'll just state very quickly that like all the feedback tonight on traffic, on displacement, this is incredibly important and valuable to us. And I hope you feel that we're not here just to share information, but we want you to help shape what's important. And in many ways, this is part of the priorities that are in the recent report. So over the next few months, we'll be thinking through, we want to engage in different types of outreach, whether it's meeting individually or with as larger meetings, to really go through these issues. And as many of you know, we work as a city, and so we're working closely with HPD, with DOT. The neighborhood planning work, even though it's led by DCP, is really a collective effort. So I just want everybody to know that we're not, the focus of tonight was on draft zoning, but we do intend to really flesh out the plan more. And then with that, I'll hand it over to Crystal Hudson.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for your comments and questions and feedback. That's, literally why we're here and why we're doing this. I recognize that none of these processes are perfect. And so we've done a ton of outreach over the last several months to try to get as much engagement as possible. There will be further public engagement opportunities. So I think for folks who are joining tonight for the first time and haven't been part of the AAMUP process previously, I would encourage you to tell as many people as possible. We're going to have in-person sessions, so it's not everything is going to be virtual, and we do that so that we're accessible to everyone, so that people who prefer to be virtual can join us this way, and that people who prefer to be in person can also have an opportunity to chime in. The reason why we did this rezoning and why we even approached it this way is because it was really important to me to have robust community engagement and to not leave it up to the developers and solely to city planning to determine for us what the future of our neighborhood should look like. And so, this is all really valuable information. It's information that is being taken down, being notated, and that will be referenced. And as I mentioned, this is the first sort of, and Jonah and Jesse also mentioned this in their presentation, this is the first sort of piece in a very technical process for a rezoning. It's not the last. There will be several other opportunities for people to have their voices heard. So I just want to encourage you all to continue to engage in this process, to continue to show up to these meetings. And if you can't show up, tell neighbors and friends and family members to show up, because, you all are exactly the people that we want to hear from. With regards to Underhill Avenue, which I know has been a big point brought up here tonight, that's not really the focus of this rezoning conversation in particular. And DOT wasn't on this call, but they should be on future engagements. They've been involved in past public engagements with this process. They will be involved as we move along in the process and get through some of the more technical pieces. My office will be holding a meeting. We don't have a date confirmed, but as long as you share your contact information with us or you've emailed my office, then we will be reaching out to you once we have the date and details confirmed, where we will have DOT present to talk specifically about Underhill Avenue. So please stay tuned on that. And I just want to thank everybody again for coming. Thank you to DCP for the presentation. And I look forward to much more engagement as we move through the rest of this rezoning process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember. I'll just conclude by putting a plug for our website, which we'll be posting the presentation and also a recording as well. And then if you want to reach out to us directly, please email Atlantic Plan at planning.nyc.gov. We also put the council members' team's contact info because they've been incredibly helpful for us in providing resources in addition to being a partner general. So we, with that, want to thank you all again for joining us this evening and greatly looking forward to working with you all in the next steps in this neighborhood plan process. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, everyone. Have a good evening. Good night.